peerage or domain? What do you mean? Zenjirou shivered inside again upon the sudden topic chance while he replied without letting it show on his face or in his tone. I will explain. Secretary Fabio started his explanation. Our Karpa kingdom has scattered landholdings under the direct control of the royalty, besides the capital and its outskirts. The lord of these lands is Her Highness Aura at the present time, and governors are installed there, but as royalty, you have the right to take them over. It will be redundant when you stay inside the inner palace like you have so far, but when you increase your activities outside from now on, you would certainly need your own title and a capital you can spend freely. Not to mention, an independent source of funds will be essential should you desire to add more henchmen like Knight Odorio. Secretary Fabio brought his explanation to a finish like that. Zenjirou was immersed in his thoughts. I see now. He got a point there, but considering that he was the loyal retainer of the queen, it was obviously weird, even if he had a point. When Zenjirou, the husband of the queen, gained a title or domain, even if only nominal, and obtained an independent income, it meant that Aura would lose the control over him. To begin with, sharing even a part of the earnings from the scattered landholdings currently unified under Aura, simply meant that she had less money to spend freely, too. The prince consort had a status and income of his own, levying an army of his own with that income. That was obviously not something the close advisor of the queen would suggest. Is he suspicious of me? No, it's too obvious, even if that's the case. If anything, he's giving me a warning, I guess, in a roundabout manner. While he pondered like that, the secretary stood at attention and suspiciously watched his every movement with his strict eyes. As he had sworn loyalty to Aura, he was trustworthy, but when he gave him a cold glare of suspicion like this, Zenjirou felt uncomfortable and fearful. Zenjirou knew at least that this wasn't the place to be obstinate and give an uncooperative answer, so he cleared his throat once with an affected cough, then honestly denied it. That won't be necessary. The centralization of finances and power is essential for the restoration of the royal family. However, I thought you had made up your mind to leave the inner palace to be of use to Her Highness Aura. Excuse me for saying this, but even when you are Her Highness's consort and acknowledged as a direct royalty, your repertoire of what you can accomplish is rather limited without a title. Provoking words from an inexpressive face secretary with a flat tone. Zenjirou let his inner irritation boil up, temporarily softened his fear and wariness towards the man standing in front of him through anger and replied somewhat emotional. Even if that's the case, it's a problem to be discussed between my wife and I. You've no right to propose it to me over her head. After he said that, Zenjirou immediately regretted it with, damn, I went too far, but it was too late. However, surprisingly enough, the biting words and irritation uncloaked in his answer were satisfying for Secretary Fabio. Yes, please forgive me for speaking out of line. His inexpressive mask crumbled for a tiny bit and revealed a smile as he deeply lowered his head towards Zenjirou. A few hours later. The sunlight, shining in from the windows, started to get a sunset tinge, when Secretary Fabio visited Aura, who was attending to her duties in her office. Your Highness, I have returned. Aura only glanced at him as he bowed curtly while remaining seated at her desk. Well done, Fabio. You have done well, too, Alejandro. You may leave now. The young and serious-looking man standing behind her, her second secretary Alejandro, handed Secretary Fabio the pack of dragonskin parchments he was holding, upon his master's words. Fabio-sama, these are the documents for today. Okay. I will take over from here on. After handing the dragonskin parchments to the middle-aged first secretary, the second secretary sincerely bowed once, then left. Secretary Fabio headed over to the desk and called out to the writing queen. Did you fare with Alejandro well, Your Highness? Aura stopped her hand that was leading the ball pen upon his question and raised her eyes from the paper at her hands to the slender face of her secretary standing in front of her. Quite so. His conduct is rather adorable, unlike yours. Still, he is not all that quick on the uptake for his job yet. If I were to be feeling well, it would be alright to have him around to let him get accustomed to it, but right now he can fulfill a substitute role at best. The queen gave a harsh evaluation, whereat Secretary Fabio answered with a light shrug of his shoulders. Understood. I will do my utmost from now on to teach him, so that he will meet your standards. As the first secretary, teaching the young secretaries was one of Fabio's duties as well. Do that. By the way, how did it go? Aura questioned. Not panicking on the sudden topic change, the middle-aged secretary was quick on the uptake and responded. It appears that he is somewhat accustomed to keep up appearances from the outset. Due to that, I believe that he will not commit any fatal mistakes if we were to entrust official matters to him. His etiquette gets a passing mark as well. There is much I would like to point out, but everything still is within a permissible scope. I would dare to say that it is unlikely that he will cause a problem due to being unaware of the etiquette outside. Aura spilled a sigh of relief for now from the everything is fine report of her secretary. The secretary talked swiftly in a fluent speech, then temporarily stopped and added some more at the end after a short shrug of his shoulders. Also, I tried to tempt him into accepting a peerage and land from the holdings of the crown, but he rejected it. Aura showed a sullen face and buried her head in her hands when her secretary said so blatantly. There you go again with your provocations. Still, a peerage and land, huh? It certainly is worth considering in prospect of my husband's future activities. The queen took her hands off her face and supported her chin with them, immersing herself in her thoughts with a serious expression. In reaction, Secretary Fabio twisted the corners of his mouth into a faint smile and said bantering. Please talk about that in plenty between the two of you. Because it apparently is not a matter a mere secretary as myself can poke his nose into over your head. Aura discerned from his tone that Zenjirou must have said that and replied with a small smile. How typical of my prudent husband. Aura showed her brightest expression of today, whereat Secretary Fabio. Glad to hear that. Come to think of it, you personally met the envoy from the Twin Kingdom today, did you not? What did he say? Changed the topic and asked her. To find a point of compromise over what to do with the latent power of the bestowal magic that Zenjirou had, they had held a secret meeting today. Aura lightly shrugged her shoulders on his question and answered. First of all, my initial impression was that they do not intend to restrain our child. But they seem to be ready to intervene if my husband were to make a child with someone else than me. Secretary Fabio inquired further. Will the Twin Kingdom really be appeased just by not letting Zenjirou-sama take any concubines? Aura shrugged her shoulders once more and honestly shook her head. I doubt it. In fact, they hinted at tying the knot between my husband and a princess of a branch family of the Sharo family. With the premise of taking the child between them to the Twin Kingdom, naturally. This is nothing definite, but my gut feeling tells me that they are more focused on winning over the space-time magic bloodline for their own country rather than trying to prevent that our country keeps the bestowal magic bloodline. Probably something along the lines of, we're even with you. Of course, that was only an excuse from their side, while Aura had her own excuses. To begin with, Zenjirou hadn't intentionally stolen their bloodline or anything, so they had no reason to comply any further. That said, Aura didn't expect either that foreign affairs followed such prim rules. I wonder at what point a compromise can be reached. No idea. It is hard to say anything at this point. I am afraid that we will talk past each other for a while longer. After all, there is a bloodline magic at stake. We both cannot yield for various reasons. To look for the silver lining, they also recognize war as the very last and worst option. After saying that, Aura craned her neck again while still leaning against the backrest. In the worst case, it might not even reach a conclusion in your lifetime. Aura frowned from the realistic tinted bad prediction that her secretary mentioned. We can only prepare ourselves for a drawn-out argument. If possible, I would like to avoid that. The longer it takes to solve a matter like this, the more both sides will see the legitimacy of their own claims and stop compromising. I would rather not see that the generation of my child will spark the next great war. I am restricted until I give birth anyway, and making over-hasty decisions is never good. Further on, it will be troublesome when the secret gets out by chance. I am sure you can imagine what someone like Puyol would say if he were to get wind of this. As Secretary Fabio understood what Aura was getting at, he made a small sigh and agreed. He would gleefully push a concubine onto Zenjirou-sama for sure. In order to actively steal the bestowal magic. The ambitious General Puyol would never let the chance to capture the bloodline magic of another country escape. Prudence is the key, prudence. Aura mumbled as if to convince herself and unconsciously stroke her stomach holding the child with her right hand. A certain day a few months later. Right now was the coolest season of the year in the Karpa Kingdom. The balmy sunlight, not getting hotter than 20 degrees during the day, shone in through the open windows and comfortably lightened up the room. Aura's morning sickness was gone, but in exchange her stomach had started to stand out. Clad in an unusual loose and red dress. Around the same time, Zenjirou attended a ceremony in the reception hall of the palace, clad in the formal attire of the Karpa Kingdom with the main color red that still didn't seem to suit him all too much. Another chair was set up next to the empty throne. This seat was reserved to Zenjirou. Normally, it was common sense that the throne for the ruler differed from the chair for the consort next to it through an easily visible distinction in size or decoration, but the chair Zenjirou was currently sitting on was nearly identical with the throne in size, decoration and quality of the stones used for it. the prince consort can't outdo the queen, but as a woman, the queen can't outdo her husband. Aura really has been put in a tight spot. In principle, the ceremonies he attended in Aura's stead were all of the kind, where a person with a royal title only had to be present. Zenjirou told himself to do so while he kept a tidy, doll-like seating posture on top of his vice throne made of red stone. His only role was to greet the nobles with a wave of his hand when the civil official, leading the ceremony, called his name. Listening to the clear words of the civil official, Zenjirou started to mentally prepare himself. At that moment. Today, you are in the very presence of His Gracious Majesty Zenjirou-sama, a representative of the Karpa family. Everyone, please give His Highness a grand applause. Zenjirou was so surprised by the unexpected words from the Master of Ceremonies that he unconsciously let the air get stuck in his throat. But this wasn't the time to be surprised. When he looked at the face of the young civil official in charge of the ceremony, he didn't feel any malice from his words said just now, but even so, he couldn't leave it alone like this. Zenjirou lightly took a hold of the decorative bronze sword hanging down on the left side of his waist with his right hand, then reprimanded with a loud voice to suppress his nervousness. Correction. I am not here as a representative of the Karpa family. I am here to substitute for Her Highness Aura, the one and only absolute ruler of the Karpa kingdom. It were sharp and forceful words, quite different from the usual Zenjirou. Of course they didn't come from the heart. It was a well-performed act, going to the utmost limits of his capacity. However, by putting his hand onto his sword, he signalized that he was prepared to bestow punishment depending on the circumstances. The Master of Ceremonies turned pale in the face upon the unexpected scolding of the direct royalty and corrected himself. My deepest apologies. Let me amend it. You are in the very presence of Her Highness Aura's husband Zenjirou-sama, acting as a proxy for Her Highness. When he saw how the civil official was on the verge of collapsing, Zenjirou unconsciously felt like apologizing with the words, "Sorry, I went too far." However, this mistake was something Zenjirou could never overlook in his position. Substituting for Aura at this place meant that he had Aura's permission to be here after all. On the other hand, being here as a representative for the royal family would imply that Zenjirou attended by the direct request of the organizer of this ceremony without consulting with Aura. In other words, Zenjirou would be executing his power as a royalty. That, of all things, should never be happening. Zenjirou deliberately averted his eyes from the noisy nobles and stifled his inner impatience. Those of lower rank were not supposed to casually call out to someone of higher rank. Due to that etiquette, Zenjirou himself had no choice but to go around, calling out to people, when he wanted to accomplish his goal. He vigorously walked around on the red carpet in his unfamiliar cloth shoes in pursuit of his goal. Oh, who have we got here? Count Bologna, I have heard your name from my dear wife, saying that you are a capable civil official and a cultured person that embodies elegance. Zenjirou-sama. I am highly delighted for the praising words. I am really fortunate to get to strike a conversation with you here, Zenjirou-sama. Thank you very much for your attending today's ceremony. Oh, don't mention it. It was a direct order from my beloved wife, Her Highness Aura after all. As her subject and her husband, doing a service like this is only natural. He emphasized that he was here on Aura's order in all respects. If you say so. However, you yourself started to leave the inner palace more often lately, did you not? As a retainer, I am truly pleased about that. I guess the desire to spread your wings by yourself prevailed. Count Bologna commented. No, it's nothing like spreading my wings. I feel like a candle without its fire when my dear wife is away from the inner palace due to her duties, so I merely do it to distract me from the loneliness. Saying so, Zenjirou grinned broadly. The noble in front of him laughed loudly with his shoulders trembling, whether he knew of Zenjirou's inner thoughts or not. Ha ha ha, oh my. You truly have a deep affection for Her Highness. Yes. I never considered myself to be such the devoted type either. Be it asleep or awake, my head is always filled with my dear wife and the child in her stomach. Thanks to that, the looks directed at him from all directions started to fill with disappointment and contempt one by one. She was sitting on the couch and calmly called out to the envoy from the Twin Kingdom sitting upright across from her. As you can see, I am pregnant. Forgive my sloppy attire. No offense taken. I am extremely grateful to be granted an audience with Her Highness. The envoy from the Twin Kingdom replied with formal words to the utterance of the Queen and bowed respectfully. Moreno Militello, emissary of the Twin Kingdom of Sharawa and Jilbel.